The Batman, a masterpiece? I'll tell you this. Looking at this film, there's definitely David Fincher influences working here with films such as Seven and Zodiac. I would even throw the Saw films into the mix here. You got this gritty realism that's working here. This is a Batman that is still under construction with the early stages of the Bat Layer, the Batmobile, and the gadgets. It's like we're watching him evolve. This Batman is still learning. He hasn't even created his persona for Bruce Wayne yet as that playboy billionaire. When you look at that funeral scene in particular, he doesn't speak much and appears very distant. He's only focused on getting the job done and being Batman, which is an interesting approach. Battison, he brings his own thing here. I like the gestures, the body movements, especially with his eyes. The eyes, they say a lot. He's got the stranger persona thing going on, and I like the anger that he possesses here. He shows such a great sense of vengeance, and it's pretty cool to kind of see how he emerges from the shadows. I liked seeing Batman in the crime scene investigation moments in particular. He felt very much like an outsider and was treated like one by the police. I just would have liked it had he kind of one up one of the detectives or a forensic investigator, just to kind of show us why Gordon values having him at those crime scenes so much. I mean, he's supposed to be the world's greatest detective. Colin Farrell's Oswald Cobblepot is quite interesting. Kind of got the Scarface thing going on with him. I'm curious to see where he and Matt Reeves decide to take this character. I'm hearing he's supposed to be getting his own HBO Max series, which I will check out. Zoe Kravitz Catwoman, she's fine. She does her own thing here, but by any means, she's no Michelle Pfeiffer. The Riddler is more of a serial killer in this film. I would have liked it had they made him a bit more intellectually arrogant to play more towards his comic book character, his persona, while having that serial killer infusion. But the thing that I noticed when I walked away from this film, and even today, is that nothing about Paul Dano's Riddler is memorable. I can't think of a scene or a dialogue or line that really makes him stand out in his own way. It's not to say that his performance is bad or anything. He gave a good performance. It's just that his Riddler didn't really do anything for me. When I look at Nolan's films and I look at his villains like Ra's al Ghul, Joker, Two-Face, or Bane, I to this day remember a scene or a line of dialogue or something that sticks out about them and I could talk about them, and I haven't seen those movies in quite some time. And that says something, they're memorable. And I'm not getting that here with Paul Dano's Riddler. The thing about this film is that it didn't grab me. I didn't feel invested in the story or characters. Stakes were low. I didn't care for anybody. I didn't care or feel anything when Alfred blew up. Alfred's my boy. The stakes weren't high enough. Hardly any tension for me. I will give credit to the funeral scene with the bomb strapped to the guy and Batman trying to save his life. It was the only scene to feel like some tension was building up, and I felt in this scene is where Riddler was finally emerging as this big threat of a villain, and that things were going to get worse from here on out. But they don't, and he just kind of gets pushed to the side. He was barely in the film, in my opinion, and that's what leads me to say this film was overstuffed with characters. But Matt Reeves, he was smart enough to kind of weave and wove in every character's little subplot into the story and everything, where if you try to take one of them out, it still wouldn't work, so you have to rework everything. This film should have primarily been focused on Batman trying to take down the Riddler, with everything else being on the side or trashed or set up and saved for the sequel. The Batman and Catwoman little kiss love scene I felt was a bit rushed. The fight scene in the beginning of the film was actually the best fight scene in the film, but all the other fight scenes after that throughout the film were actually quite disappointing and lackluster. It shouldn't work that way. Your fight scenes should be getting better as the movie progresses, or your action scenes, the tension, all that should be escalating as the movie progresses. You shouldn't throw all your bag of tricks in the beginning of the film. And that third act of the movie, I just wasn't feeling it. It was rather weak and disappointing. I was already checked out, but I was holding on in hopes that Matt Reeves has something up his sleeves, but quite frankly, no. And I'll admit, I was kind of falling asleep. One of the strong points of this film, I will say, in my opinion, is the film cinematography. It looks cool. I like the shots, the point of view angles. Also, I like some of the concept and approaches to this film. One of my favorite scenes in this film, by far, the chase scene. The sound design surrounding that scene was great, especially if you've seen it in theaters. The roar of that Batmobile sounded quite nice. I liked the way it was introduced in the shadows and how it couldn't just take off, but it had to start up and rev up like a jet engine. The chase scene was visually cool, but I wasn't really feeling it. I admit it looked good. I would have liked to see Battison Batmobile to appear a bit more unstoppable during that scene, just to kind of represent Batman's anger and drive. He had the sense that you can't, you're not going to get away from me, and I'm going to get you even if it costs me my life. And I love that conviction that he had. I just wish the Batmobile kind of reflected that a bit. I also want to point out, I like the shots from Batman escaping the police station. That was quite nice. Everything about this film looks good from a visual and sound design standpoint, but it's not enough for me. The story and writing is just a tad bit too scattered and isn't strong enough enough to catapult this film for me. You know, if I had to use the critic Roger Ebert's 4-star rating scale here, I would give this film, The Batman, 3 stars. To give an idea of how I rate films, I'll throw in Nolan's Batman films. Batman Begins, 4 stars. Dark Knight, 4 stars. The Dark Knight Rises, 3 stars. Now, I think The Dark Knight Rises is better than The Batman as a film, whereas The Batman is a weaker 3 stars for me, but there are some things about it that I actually like better than The Dark Knight Rises. I will say this though, the sequel for The Batman, I have high hopes for. I feel like it will be better. I hope I'm not wrong. I'm hearing that the villain for the sequel might be Mr. Freeze, which he's one of my favorite villains actually. If they don't decide to do him, then I would really like to see Mad Hatter or Clayface. I've read somewhere that fans would like to see Scarecrow done in Matt Reeves' Batman world, which I would like to see as well. I'm curious though, which villains would you guys like to see in the sequel? All in all, this isn't a bad film by any means, but it is nowhere near a masterpiece. I'm just saying.